Okay, from a Western perspective, American society is based on an individualistic paradigm and, in an ideal sense, from Greek philosophy and rationality. The ideals of individualism and self-determination are codified in the culture through her founding documents. We're all about the individual and the ability of the individual to rise above their circumstances and make a name for themselves. That's what drives us. That's who we are as a culture. It's individualistic. We're not necessarily worried about the communities because our communities are jacked up anyway, and the best thing we can do sometimes is improve ourselves, get away from it, and keep moving. That's a Western ideal. Over in the Near East, they would have thought that was blasphemy and disloyalty, and you might have been put to death for even talking like that. So, like I said, they both have their positives and their negatives. Thus, honor and shame are viewed not in terms of public value, but in terms of inherent character and intrinsic worth. The Western concept of honor revolves around the integrity or moral constitution of the individual. Ostensibly, these are principles that are paramount in determining an individual's worth, and in theory, such evaluation is made manifest through the actions of the person. My integrity shows up as I live my life. My honor shows up as I live my life. According to Vondervan and Johnson in the book The Subtle Power of Spiritual Abuse, shame, from an American perspective, is a sense of inferiority, negative self-assessment, or an indictment on an individual's personhood. It's a destructive signal about a person and their worth. Notice that as opposed to Near Eastern shame, which is rooted in social devaluation, Western American shame is rooted on an individual's self-devaluation as a person. To clarify this concept further, it's necessary to contrast the concept of guilt and shame in Western society because we use those words interchangeably. These terms are often used because they tend to act in concert. They come together a lot of times, guilt and shame. And so we associate them as being the same thing even if they're different. Guilt is first and foremost a legal determination of action. And secondly, an emotional reaction to said determination. Whether it is social law, criminal law, or moral law that has been violated, a determination of guilt is a declaration that a law has been violated and can be accompanied by a negative emotional reaction. So guilt is something that a court says, are they innocent or guilty, and the court says they're guilty. Or social court says, are they innocent or guilty, and they're determined to be guilty. It's a status. It's a determination of a person's actions. Did they violate the moral law? Did they violate the social law? Did they violate that's what guilt is. Did they violate some kind of code that exists? Thus, when a person says that they feel guilty for an action that's questionable in their own conscience, they're experiencing emotions which they've come to associate with guilty actions. So guilt is a declaration, and then guilt is emotion. I'm declared guilty. Most people, if you're not sociopathic, have a specific feeling about having been declared guilty or having done something for which they can be declared guilty of. We call that feeling guilt along with the status. A person can feel guilty even when they're not guilty. I think everybody's felt that before. You start to feel guilty about something even though you don't exactly know what you did to feel guilty. You just kind of feel that way because you wish you would have done something different or could have chosen to do something different. Or a person can be guilty and feel absolutely nothing. Notice that the emotion of guilt is a reaction to a predicated action, and that the feelings are confined to the context of the act in question. So when we talk about guilt, we're talking about an action that has questionable legal status. Shame takes the emotional and psychological analysis a step further. It becomes an indictment of the quality or value of a person's existence or their personhood. Whereas guilt says that a person is in violation of a code, shame says that the person is less valuable because of that violation. Within Western context, shame is not a dynamic. Furthermore, This is an indictment that an individual makes against their own character. It's not about what everybody else says, it's about how you begin to feel about your own value. Within the Western context, shame is not a dynamic between the individual and society. Instead, it's a dynamic between a person and their sense of self.